could mean that guys like Lawrence Okoli, and especially if it's your right eye, if Jake's getting hit in his right eye, that usually would mean that he's getting jabbed, because that jab in orthodox would come out from the left hand on the right eye side.
And that experience would have been somewhat of a dawn of realization upon Jake Paul that this is actually happening now. So to an extent, I'll be honest, I actually feel sorry for Jake Paul. I mean, I don't.
Reports have surfaced claiming that Jake Paul was knocked out during sparring while preparing for his upcoming fight with Anthony Joshua. Paul was later seen with a visibly bruised and swollen eye, which he said was the result of hard sparring rounds with heavyweight Lawrence Okoli. The revelation immediately raised concerns about the intensity of Paul's camp and whether his body is coping with the level of opposition he's now facing.
Keep it going. Way too long. There you go. Good round, Jake. Check that.
Boxing commentator Joey Knight revealed that Jake Paul has been sparring with several elite heavyweight fighters, including Lawrence Okoli, Frank Sanchez, and Jared Anderson. According to Knight, the sessions were brutally intense, leaving Paul with noticeable injuries and visible damage. He described this stretch of training as the toughest week of Paul's boxing career, emphasizing that the raw power and experience of these heavyweights pushed Paul far beyond anything he had previously encountered. The bruises and marks left behind were clear evidence of just how punishing the preparation has been.
Ranked Lawrence Okoli. That is who Jake Paul has been sparring with over these past few weeks.
Trouble finding Hussein Mohammed early on.
And a lot of you guys will know this because Jake Paul showed the bruises and marks on his face and said that it was Lawrence Okoli that had done that. And faces don't necessarily tell you how a spar went. Some guy can have blood all over him, he can have a busted up nose, but he still won the rounds in sparring. But I can only imagine that this week has been a very, very humbling experience for Jake Paul. In fact, the past few weeks will have been eye-opening for Jake Paul. A past few weeks where he has sparred the likes of Lawrence Okoli, of Jared Anderson, and of Frank Sanchez as well. And being that I have seen Jake Paul go life and death with Tommy Fury, you can guarantee you that Okoli, that Anderson, and that Frank Sanchez have basically manhandled Jake Paul in there. And that experience would have been somewhat of a dawn of realization upon Jake Paul that this is actually happening now. So to an extent, I'll be honest, I actually feel sorry for Jake Paul. I mean, I don't, because then I remember the 70 odd million that he's reported to be earning at the end of this fight. But you can't deny, right, that in a world where these almost fantasy fights and whatnot are making such a shitload of cash, that Jake Paul's probably being paid in line for this fight, actually. And the reason I say he's being paid in line is because I really don't think it takes a genius to work out where I'm going with my prediction for this fight. And that is obviously, no, in fact, drum roll please. AJ via knockout, obviously, technical knockout, if Jake gets...
Jake Paul's decision to train with top-level heavyweights has drawn heavy scrutiny from analysts and fans alike. While Paul has built his reputation by taking on increasingly difficult opponents, this phase of training has exposed the steep reality of preparing for a former heavyweight champion like Anthony Joshua. Footage from sparring sessions shows Paul struggling to manage elite power and pressure, revealing defensive weaknesses that were not as obvious in earlier fights. Boxing analyst Wade pointed out that Paul was reportedly knocked out in sparring, raising serious questions about whether his confidence matches his actual readiness.
Question is, which one of those two things is happening? And question is, how is it going down? Because what we know about Anthony Joshua is that he has a nasty lead hook, and he's going to have a reach advantage on Jake, just like Lawrence Okoli does in the gym, which is why Jake has brought him in. So that jab's going to be effective. That lead hand of AJ is going to be effective. How does Jake maneuver around that? And again, you can look at this a couple of ways. One, okay, you get hit with it in camp, so you don't get hit with it in the fight, which is why you bring these heavyweights in. It's why you bring Jared Anderson, Lawrence Okoli, Frank Sanchez in. Or two, there's a massive flaw in what Jake's doing, that he's continually getting hit with this, and the indication that he's getting hit by Okoli means he's going to get hit the same way with Anthony Joshua. I tend to believe a little bit of both, right? You do this so that it doesn't happen, but also how much can Jake really learn and to avoid something that's coming out with the jab or with the lead hook, or just again the distance control and the range of a guy like Okoli and a guy like AJ.
Video clips from Paul's training show him repeatedly taking clean shots to the chin, often from much larger and stronger opponents. The physical toll of these sessions is evident, with visible marks and fatigue setting in. Sparring with fighters like Oakley represents a massive jump in difficulty, combining size, speed, technique, and knockout power. Observers note that this level of opposition is exposing limitations in Paul's defense, durability, and ability to recover under sustained pressure.
6'5", he isn't 250 pounds. He's not a natural heavyweight. And you can say that's an advantage to Jake. He's going to be able to move around a little bit. Again, we'll talk about his feet in a second. But it's more to me the fact that what we're not seeing is the biggest weakness of Jake's, on top of the fact that he's gotten an eye smashed up in sparring. They said Frank Sanchez made his nose look like a crescent moon. We'll get to that in a second. Lawrence Okolie is giving him a freaking shiner in sparring. So again, you could say that's great work from Jake to be able to have these high-level guys come in, but you also have to admit that he's getting hit, and he's getting hit a lot by guys that aren't Anthony Joshua in terms of their skill and ability, or at least not at the highest level that AJ has been to. So,
but we brought in world champion heavyweight sparring partners, guys who are 270 pounds, 250 pounds, sparring them, has been insane. I still got the remnants of
you're taking a little shot there. I like that you're taking those shots.
Veteran analyst Castillo offered a blunt assessment, stating that a real fight with Anthony Joshua would be brutal for Jake Paul. He explained that no amount of sparring can fully prepare someone for the relentless pressure and explosive power of a former world champion. Castillo suggested that if Paul were to survive even 3 rounds with Joshua, it would already be considered an achievement. His comments underlined the massive gap between influencer boxing, carefully managed matchups, and the unforgiving reality of elite heavyweight competition.
It could go, I think, honestly speaking, if Jake can last 3 rounds, in a way he's kind of won a mental victory, because I'll be real, I think everybody's expecting AJ to come there and blast them out in 1 round. But I think a moral victory would be if Jake just lands 1 stun punch on him. That would be good enough for him. But kudos to Jake Paul for even doing this, because honestly speaking, I'm not gonna lie to you, one of the greatest moments that I've witnessed in boxing history, and I know Jake Paul is obviously an influencer, and I'm a boxing fan. I love boxing, so this is a bit weird to say that this is quite a huge moment. But just when he came out last year, and he came out with his brother, and he came out a little right now, I got goosebumps, because in that moment I said to myself, how can anybody watch this and not feel like dreams can't come true? He must even surprise himself looking at that and think to himself, how on earth am I even here fighting Mike Tyson? And one more thing, even speaking of that, I give him a lot of respect for not knocking out Mike Tyson, because he could have. And so I respect him for that. So against AJ, and for AJ as well, AJ gets a lot of flack, but at the same time, I think AJ's he's about 35, 36, 37 right now. He doesn't really have anything else to prove right now, so why not cash out of a big fight?
Simon Jordan, speaking alongside TalkSport hosts, highlighted Joshua's devastating one-punch knockout ability and how it dramatically raises the danger of this matchup. Analysts stress that Joshua's power isn't hypothetical, it's proven through years of championship-level knockouts. While Paul's heavy sparring is meant to simulate that danger, even seasoned observers admit there is a huge difference between controlled gym rounds and facing a fully focused heavyweight champion under fight night conditions.